Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today I'm going to talk about a protection policy for Android devices using Intune. So, before making this policy or before creating this policy, you might be wondering why do I need this policy, right? And even if you say what is this policy is going to do, right? Why should I rely on it? And if this is the policy that then I'm going to create, then what are the controls, what are the things that I am going to configure, and how this policy is going to help me. So to understand and to know that all things, I'll demonstrate how you can create this policy. Also, I'm going to show you what features and functionalities are part of that policy. So let's start here. We have different options available for policy creation. So we can create a policy for iOS and iPadOS. The next is Android. Third is Windows, and fourth is Windows Information Protection. So I have made a video on Windows, and I'm creating one for this one for Android, and also I'll be creating a video for iOS, iPad, and then Microsoft Windows or Information Protection. So let's get started for Android. So this is the initial step, which is basic, where you will just give it a name to the policy and then you will put a description. So let's say I wanted to mention it here as this policy would be targeting the Android devices, and then I can add more description or details whenever I wanted to make that more user friendly, as well as that should be something as soon as I see that details or description, I understand and I know, okay, so this is the policy for this purpose or this reason, right? And that is when you would be adding that description here. So next, here is the main objective of this policy, how we wanted to deploy this policy, and what are the particular applications we wanted to target using this policy, right? And that is when we get many different options here. You can see all apps, all Microsoft apps, and core Microsoft apps. So if I select all apps, I get a whole list of applications to see what are the applications part of this policy. And the next question comes, which applications or how these applications are added to this list here, right? So these are the applications, those are added by Microsoft and the respective vendors who have added their applications as part of Intune catalog to the Intune catalog for Android devices, and that is when those are available and shown up here. So similarly, if I don't want add all the third-party apps and only focus on Microsoft apps, I can do that by selecting all Microsoft apps, and then I can see all the Microsoft products only here. And the next is core Microsoft apps, right? So so these are the core apps. So why these are the core apps? Because these are being used highly and mostly across the companies and uh, across the businesses, I would say. And you must have seen that those are the highly been used applications, and that is why those are being considered as core apps. So I'll select all apps for now, but I'm just showing you so you are aware what are the different apps types and what are those, right? So let's click next. So here are a bunch of options and settings that we need to configure in order to make the policy with maybe I wanted to make this policy more restrictive than maybe just set at a medium level, or of if not, then I can set it to at least a low level where I don't want to control everything, but I also wanted people to give some of the flexibility on their access levels as well as data and documentation and everything on their devices, right? So here is the section of data transfer, and then encryption, and then functionality. So each of these different sections here represents a particular use case as well as particular set of settings and configurations that we have to make available or set up. So the first says backup or data to Android backup service. That means if I wanted to allow the backup to be happen by using the native service of the Android devices, then I'll set it to allow. But in most cases, each organization or companies, they don't want that to happen, and that is when they selected block. That means it is simply going to block that backup service, or backup service is not going to work on that particular application workload, right? The next is send org data to other apps. Other apps means any application that is communicating with the mobile device, be it inbound as well as outbound traffic, right? And that is when it is going to simply let do that on the user device, even if it is a user's personal device, and that is when we would decide here whether how we wanted to target that and manage that. So in most cases you would see it is being managed using policy managed apps, and here we have many different options again. So to if I select policy management or managed apps, that means I get the option to exempt a particular application. But here is a caution: if I am exempting or excluding any of the applications, so there could be any other implications, like if I'm exempting a application where the data is being highly confidential or something, and that data can be shared or used, or maybe we can say the oversharing as well. So and that is not the case we wanted to do or we wanted to happen, and that is why this is not a good idea. And even if we wanted to do, then we have to really thoroughly test it and see what are the consequences and implications of it, right? And if simply I don't want to do that, then I will not add any application as an exempt. Instead, I will focus on save copies of org data on. So this option says if I wanted to allow save copies of the files and folders and data locally to the device, that means I need to make it to allow. But I would not like to do that as well because I wanted to set only the company data on a company environment, be it OneDrive, SharePoint, or file shares, or any company storage locations, right? And that is when we would be setting it to block. And then the next feature, which is allow users to save copies to selected services. So here we get options to OneDrive for Business, then SharePoint, and then other options as well. So it totally depends on each company, because each company might be using different applications and products to store the data, share those data internally and externally, right? And that is when we would be utilizing those services which are listed here. Now you might be saying that, okay, I'm using Dropbox, but the Dropbox is not part of this one. Yeah, that is not part of this, but to share the access as well as files and data internally and externally, there are native features and settings on each cloud platform. So those can be managed as well. So that's part of a separate section or separate, maybe we can say the separate video altogether. But yeah, I'm just giving you a bit context about it. The next is transfer telecommunication data to. So here we have different options. First is none, do not transfer this data between apps. So before introducing these options to you, I would like to tell you what are these two options, this one and this one. So these are the options or features which are related to or relevant to the redirection of the messages or the context or the contact numbers. Those are coming out in the applications like Teams or Outlook. For example, I receive one chat message by someone and they have sent an contact number, but now I wanted to call them. So to call them, I would simply click on that number. So it is going to let me ask for redirection. And if I allow it, and even if I don't allow it, it would try to open a particular dial pad or dialer, right? So which is similar to, or which is the a dial pad of mobile device, right? Where we can dial the numbers and call someone. So that is when these are the two options. So from here we see different options. First says none, we do not want any apps to be open while if someone tries to open or try to call someone which they got number from Teams or Outlook. A specific dialer app, that means I need to provide that details here like package ID and app name. And then next is any policy managed dialer application. That means this is going to cover a native dialer application as well as the applications which are really been considered as a policy managed as per the Microsoft. And the last option is any dialer app. So any means there is no restrictions on it or there is no policy check whether this particular app is really been allowed using this policy or not. So it is going to simply redirect to the native application and then it is going to open. So same thing is with transfer messaging data to as well. Here we have the same features or same options which allows us to redirect to open a message and the text that is coming out of the email or Teams chat or any other communication, right? And those would be shown up here or would be redirected to. The next feature, receive data from other apps. So here we have similar options again, all apps, none, or policy managed. So mostly you would see promoted, not promoted, but the policy managed apps only. And under that, we get the different options to set up here, which is open data into org documents, then allow users to open data from selected services only. So I would not like, or any company uh, would not like that to open happen any data into org documents. Instead, they will set it to restricted mode or restrictive mode, which is only for OneDrive for business and SharePoint and not any others. Because user might be using confidential data and details and there is no easy way to track down who is using what data at what device, right? And that is why they would simply straightforward the policy on the user accounts and then this policy is going to work that way. The next is restrict, cut, copy and paste between other apps. So here are bunch of options again. So to restrict this one or to manage at certain extent, we have different options. The first is blocked, the second is policy managed apps, the third is policy managed app, with the paste in, and the last is any app. So block means it is going to block completely. So there is no excuses or there are no any any ways to you allow people to cut, copy, and paste data from one app to another, and vice versa. The next is policy managed. That means only the applications which are under managed by this policy, including business apps mostly, the Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Teams, Outlook, OneDrive, then SharePoint. So these are the different apps mostly been part of this policy managed category or policy managed apps. And the last is also the same, but here we have with it, and the last is any app. That means there is no restrictions at all. So be it if you copy something from Teams and then paste it into Gmail or maybe vice versa, that is allowed. So there is two-way communication. There is no restrictions at all. So I'll set it to policy managed apps, and it is going to take effect on that way. The next is cut and copy character limit for any apps. So if I set this to maybe I can set it to 5 times, right? So if I wanted to allow something, then I would set it to 5 or maybe particular number here to let end users do that. Otherwise, if I don't want that to happen, then I'll set it to 0 simply, right? And the next is screen capturing and Google Assistant, which is in case I wanted to disable or allow it, I can simply allow it or block it. So there is no screen capture. You might have seen that, or maybe in many cases companies don't want their employees to take screenshots of any office applications or any data which are being used on Android devices. So that is when this policy is a part of that one, and it is not letting you to do that because of this feature is blocked in the policy. The next is upload keyboard. Here we have different keyboard layouts and types. For obviously this is for Android, so we see a lot of options here. These are the different options provided by Google, and those one of any one or whichever is suitable we can deploy it or add it. If not, then we can simply set it to not required. The next is encryption. Encryption is very important to encrypt the data during data transmission as well as at rest. So definitely these are the mandatory as well as required configuration settings we should set up, and that is must have. So we can keep it required. And the next section is functionality, which is sync policy managed app data with native apps and add-ins. So this feature says in case I wanted to synchronize managed application data with native and add-in apps, then I have to make it to allow. If not, then I can block it. So what is native app? Native app are those which are provided by the maybe Android as well as the respective app developer. So for example, in Android context, there are native apps like Gmail or Google or all of those applications which has been developed by Google, and those are part of each Android device. So those are the native ones. The next is printing org data. So this is the one which is going to allow people to print the company data from their mobile devices. But in many cases, out of 100%, 99.99 would be blocked because definitely the confidentiality of the data as well as uh, the usage also, right? So usage means if you are allowing people to print anything from their company or corporate assets, even if it is personal device, then also they would not like you to print anything on behalf of company, right? So that is why this would be blocked always. The next is restrict web content transfer with other apps. So there are again different options. Any app, that means allowing to transfer and use on any application, be it Google Chrome browser, Microsoft Edge, or anyone, be it any browser application which is available on the Play Store, or in iOS context it is iPhone Store, right? The next is Microsoft Edge, which is Edge browser, which is strictly only this particular browser would be part of that policy, and it is whatever the files or links or anything that you are opening from Teams, Outlook, or SharePoint or OneDrive, it is going to redirect you to Microsoft Edge, and it is going to open that over there. And the next is unmanaged browser. So if you select unmanaged, that means you need to provide browser ID and browser name. So this is going to be the same as the transfer files or transfer messaging and transfer communication options which I showed you earlier. So mostly is being used by, or is used, this one, which is Microsoft Edge, and that is the one which is going to come up with policy. The next is org data notifications. So there are three options again: blocked, org data, and allow. So these are the notifications which are going to show you on the applications side on the device. For example, someone sent you an email or shared a file, or maybe someone made changes in a file, and you are a member, or that file was shared with you earlier, and those kind of notifications would be shown you on your device, and that is why this notification is going to be managed from here, either block, allow, or block org data. And the last is start Microsoft tunnel connection on app launcher. So this means that uh, tunnel means which is going to be connecting from end user's device to a company network as soon as user is going to open an application which is part of this policy, right? And it is going to kick in this tunnel to use that network to get the access, and user would be able to access that application. So in this case I'm going to set it to no, and then we'll move to the next section. The next is access requirements, right? So under access requirements we have many options right here. Under pin for access, so definitely we wanted to set pin to make sure app is secure enough, and we have the different types here. Let's say I wanted to set pin, I'll set it to numeric and not the passcode. Then I don't want to allow simple pin, so I'll be blocking it. I wanted to set minimum pin requirement of 6-digit. Biometric should be allowed, because definitely there should be a second way to authenticate users. The next is override biometric with the pin. Then I would set it to required, because biometric is something can be used, or maybe I wanted to put a second layer of security on it, so I'll do that. The next is time out minutes in, so minimum is 30 minutes. So in case the Outlook was inactive for 30 minutes, then this should ask for re-authentication, right? And that is why we need to put this time period. The next is class 3 biometrics. This is again same, these two options as to this one, the pin and authentication, and that is why we can set it up. And this is more depend on the Android device version 9 and above. The next is pin reset after a number of days. Definitely we wanted this feature to be enabled. So we can set the number of days here and set the number of previous pin values to maintain. Let's say I wanted to maintain it 10. This means that I don't want to use last 10 pins for this policy, or I don't want user to use those 10 pins. App pin when device is set, that means that is required. So as soon as this policy is applied and pushed on device or application, and when user tries to log in, then user has to set up a pin, right? And that is why this is going to push. The next is work or school account credentials for access, right? This is mandatory. Even we can set it to not required, but in many cases we would set it to required because we wanted people to authenticate with their work account and access the resources, so that would be easy for us to manage and track down what they are doing in. And the last option, recheck access requirement after number of minute inactivity. So we can set it to 30 minutes, or maybe we can set it to 25 minutes. So this is pretty customizable, right? So this was access requirements. Then next is conditional launch. So under conditional launch, we have different options again. Conditional launch has app conditions and device conditions. Conditional launch is basically for to put out a condition. For example, I wanted user to use a particular application version, and only that version is allowed to access the data. Otherwise, I would simply deny the request. And that is why we have minimum app version, let's say 12.0.0. And then what actions I wanted to warn. If the user is using this version, then I wanted to warn them saying you are using older version, you need to upgrade it. So similarly, on a device condition level as well, we have a bunch of options. So minimum OS version should be, let's say, 12. And what action I wanted to take, maybe warn it or block access. If user is using version of the device is 12, then simply block the access, and that is not I don't want to let people use, right? So this is what conditional launch is all about. And then I will move to the next, which is assignment. Here simply I would be assigning this policy to a group. Let's say this group I am targeting. You can target all the users, or maybe particular group where you wanted to test it, apply it, and see the differences and know and understand everything about the policy. Then next is review plus create. This is a complete policy summary where you will see and you can create the policy. Yeah. So yeah, that is all about it. I hope you like the video. If you have any questions, comments, put them in comments section below. And hope you learn something from this video. And yeah, thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Bye for now.